The man who vanished into the shadows of a ruined continent would soon become the obsession of an entire nation. In the turbulent aftermath of World War II, Europe was a graveyard of destroyed cities and shattered identities. Yet among the millions trying to rebuild their lives lurked thousands of men who had orchestrated the machinery of genocide. No figure embodied this dark escape more than Adolf Eichmann, the bureaucratic mastermind who organized the logistics of the Holocaust with chilling efficiency. As the Allies prosecuted high-ranking Nazis at Nuremberg, Eichmann slipped through the cracks, shedding his uniform, forging new papers, and blending into a mass of refugees desperate to avoid scrutiny. To many survivors, his disappearance felt like a gaping wound left untreated, a symbol of justice denied. Stories circulated of sightings in Switzerland, in the Middle East, in the mountains of Austria, but nothing concrete ever emerged. Governments overstretched by post-war chaos had little capacity to pursue a ghost, and for years the trail went cold. Yet far away in the young and fragile state of Israel, the memory of the Holocaust was not an open wound. It was a defining scar. Every street held survivors. Every family carried stories of loss. Eichmann was not simply a fugitive, he was the architect of their suffering. As the 1950s began, whispers of Nazi networks fleeing to South America reached Israeli ears. Among them was a name so ordinary, it seemed intentionally dull: Ricardo Clement. But beneath that alias, some believed, hid the man whose signature had doomed millions. The hunt for Eichmann was about to begin. In the fledgling state of Israel, the weight of recent history pressed on every street, every home, every conversation. The nation was not yet a decade old, stitched together by immigrants, survivors, and refugees who carried their trauma like an invisible second skin. In this fragile landscape, the memory of the Holocaust was not distant history. It was a daily reminder of why Israel had to exist at all. Families rebuilt their lives amid the silence of those who never returned, and despite the urgency of economic survival, collective grief simmered beneath the surface. For the Israeli government, bringing Nazi war criminals to justice was more than symbolic. It was deeply personal. Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion understood that the pursuit of figures like Adolf Eichmann would unify the nation, give voice to the voiceless, and demonstrate that Jewish lives could no longer be taken with impunity. Survivors gave testimonies to ministries and newspapers, often repeating the same name with trembling conviction: Eichmann. His signature appeared across transport orders, deportation lists, and death logistics. He was not merely another Nazi officer, he was the bureaucratic engineer of genocide. Yet even the desire for justice faced practical challenges. Israel was small, isolated, and still struggling to establish its intelligence services. Mossad was young, understaffed, and overstretched, tasked with both defending a vulnerable state and gathering information across hostile regions. Hunting a vanished Nazi halfway across the world seemed like an impossible luxury. But the survivors insisted, the leadership listened, and the memory of the Holocaust demanded action. In Israel's collective consciousness, the hunt for Adolf Eichmann was becoming inevitable. The first real crack in Eichmann's invisibility came from a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Buenos Aires, carried on the uncertain voice of a man no one had ever heard of. Lothar Hermann, a blind German Jewish immigrant who had fled the Nazis long before they reached his door, lived a modest life in Argentina with his daughter Sylvia. Their world was small, shaped by routine and caution, but one afternoon, Sylvia came home with a story that made her father freeze. She had met a young man named Klaus, arrogant and boastful, who spoke casually of his father's role in the war. Klaus hinted with pride that his father once held enormous power in the Third Reich, and he said the father's name was Eichmann. Hermann felt a chill he had not known in years. Could it be? Was the architect of the Holocaust living openly under a new identity in the same country where former SS officers walked the streets freely? Doubt tugged at him, yet the details Sylvia described were too disturbing to dismiss. Hermann spent days replaying the conversation, weighing the risk of being wrong against the nightmare of being right. Finally, he wrote a desperate letter to Fritz Bauer, the German prosecutor who had spent years independently hunting Nazis. Bauer, sensing the potential magnitude of the tip, relayed it to Israel. When Mossad first reviewed the message, skepticism ruled. Leads like this came often and almost always collapsed under scrutiny. But this one felt different. It had a name, a location, a pattern of behavior. And in the quiet of Mossad headquarters, a spark ignited. This could be the beginning of the trail to Adolf Eichmann. When Mossad finally took the lead, they did so with equal parts hesitation and determination. At first, the agency was reluctant. They had been burned too many times by rumors, mistaken identities, and dead ends scattered across post-war Europe and South America. Yet the report from Lothar Hermann carried a texture of authenticity that stood out from the noise. Fritz Bauer's involvement added even more weight. Bauer was not a man who chased fantasies. Still, Mossad needed confirmation, and sending agents to Argentina was a delicate gamble. Diplomatic relations were strained, and Argentina was known as a haven for former SS officers, many of whom enjoyed protection from powerful networks and sympathetic officials. The initial surveillance missions were cautious, almost invisible. Agents began mapping the quiet suburb of San Fernando, where Ricardo Clement lived. They noted his modest home, his daily commute, his rigid habits. The man they watched was thin, reserved, and carried an air of someone trying desperately not to be noticed. But details emerged that raised eyebrows: the German books in his hand, his insistence on privacy, the wary way he observed his surroundings. Yet suspicion was not enough. Mossad needed proof. Teams were deployed to question neighbors, to gather employment documents, to analyze photographs taken covertly from passing cars. Slowly, a picture began to form, one disturbingly consistent with the face that had appeared in grainy Nazi records. But absolute certainty remained just out of reach. Every step risked exposure, and every day the danger grew that Eichmann might disappear again. And so the hunt intensified, fueled by a mix of urgency, doubt, and a rising sense that history was watching. Confirming the identity of the man calling himself Ricardo Clement became an exercise in precision, patience, and quiet obsession. Mossad operatives understood that one misstep could unravel everything, alerting Eichmann, foreign intelligence services, or the vast Nazi escape networks that still pulsed beneath the surface of South America. Surveillance intensified with methodical discipline. Agents trailed him on foot, noted the rhythm of his commute, the path he took from the bus stop, and the time he returned home each evening. They studied the way his shoulders slumped, how he avoided eye contact, how he reacted when a car slowed near him. Everything about him whispered caution. Inside his modest home lived a woman and children who spoke German fluently, yet inconsistently concealed their origins. The family avoided attention, rarely mingled, and used money sparingly, despite rumors that Eichmann had once had access to immense Nazi resources. But the most telling detail emerged on a cool Argentine morning, when an operative captured a photograph of Clement pausing in the doorway. The shape of his ears, distinctive and unmistakable, matched archived Nazi images of Eichmann from the 1940s. Even so, Mossad needed more than a resemblance. They confirmed the ages of his children, they compared names used in school records, they cross-referenced letters intercepted from local German expatriates, each piece aligned with the hidden identity they sought to uncover. By early 1960, the internal reports reached a quiet, electrifying consensus. The man they were watching was almost certainly Adolf Eichmann. Now Mossad faced a new challenge, creating a plan to capture him without leaving a trace. The abduction of Adolf Eichmann began on a quiet May evening, executed with the kind of controlled tension that only years of preparation could forge. Mossad operatives had spent weeks rehearsing every step of the mission, from the timing of Eichmann's bus ride to the choreography of the grab itself. They chose a stretch of desolate road near his home in San Fernando, a place where streetlights flickered inconsistently and passing cars were scarce. As dusk settled, the agents took their positions, one pretending to fix a stalled car, another waiting in the grass, and the rest ready to converge the moment their target appeared. Eichmann stepped off the bus at precisely the time they had calculated. He walked with his usual hurried gait, clutching his work bag, eyes down as if expecting nothing. But the moment he neared the ambush point, an agent approached, asking for the time in Spanish. Eichmann hesitated just long enough. With a sudden burst of motion, the team seized him, forcing him into the waiting car as he struggled and gasped in shock. The entire operation lasted seconds. Inside the safe house, Eichmann was restrained, examined, and questioned. His fear was palpable, yet he offered no resistance once he understood who had captured him. When asked to state his name, he whispered, "Ich bin Adolf Eichmann," sealing the final confirmation Mossad needed. For 9 tense days, the operatives hid him from Argentine authorities and Nazi sympathizers, maintaining absolute secrecy while preparing for the next dangerous phase, smuggling him out of the country without anyone realizing he was gone. Getting Eichmann out of Argentina required a plan as daring as the abduction itself, carried out under the constant threat of discovery. With Eichmann hidden in the safe house, Mossad operatives knew time was their greatest enemy. Argentine authorities were unpredictable, and Nazi networks in Buenos Aires were vast, well-connected, and ready to mobilize the moment a high-value fugitive went missing. The team needed an exit strategy that left no trace, no suspicion, and no diplomatic explosion that could expose Israel's role. Their solution was audacious. They disguised Eichmann as a crew member of an El Al flight scheduled to depart Buenos Aires for Argentina's upcoming independence celebrations. To make the plan work, Eichmann had to be rendered unrecognizable and compliant. Agents sedated him carefully, ensuring he could walk if needed, but would remain too subdued to resist or draw attention. They forged documents naming him as an airline technician recovering from a head injury, complete with a bandaged face to hide his features. Every contingency was rehearsed, including how to speak to customs officers, how to maneuver through airport security, and how to respond to unexpected questions. The morning of the flight, the team transported him in an unmarked vehicle, nerves taut as piano wire. At the airport, any slip, a wrong word, a suspicious glance, could have collapsed the entire mission. But the agents moved with calm precision. Customs officers stamped their papers without hesitation, unaware of the history standing before them. Moments later, Eichmann was escorted onto the plane, strapped into a seat, and secured for departure. As the aircraft lifted off the runway, Mossad finally knew he was out of Argentina's reach. When Adolf Eichmann arrived in Israel, the nation braced for a trial that would speak not only to justice, but to the very soul of a people still haunted by memory. For the first time, survivors who had carried their trauma in silence were given a global platform. In preparation for the proceedings, Israeli prosecutors sifted through mountains of documents, orders signed in Eichmann's precise handwriting, transport lists he had overseen, memos that revealed the cold efficiency with which he had orchestrated genocide. Yet the trial was never meant to focus solely on paperwork. It was designed to let witnesses tell their stories in their own voices, in front of cameras broadcasting to the world. The courtroom became a stage where history spoke directly to the present. Survivors described cattle cars, ghettos, selections, and the relentless machinery of death that had consumed entire families. Millions watching across continents confronted the horror not as an abstraction, but through trembling voices and lived experience. Eichmann, enclosed in a bulletproof glass booth, listened with an expression that hovered between detachment and bureaucratic defensiveness. His repeated claim that he was merely following orders rang hollow against the avalanche of testimony. Israelis gathered around radios, families abroad clustered around early television sets. The trial transcended legal boundaries, transforming into a monumental act of remembrance. It forced a world eager to move on from the war to face the truth anew, that genocide is not carried out solely by fanatics with guns, but by administrators who sign forms and schedule trains. By its end, few doubted the role Eichmann had played. He had become the face of the system he once tried to hide behind. The verdict against Adolf Eichmann came as the inevitable culmination of months of testimony, evidence, and moral reckoning. On December 15, 1961, the judges delivered their decision. Guilty on nearly every count, including crimes against humanity and the systematic extermination of millions. The courtroom, which had echoed for weeks with the trembling voices of survivors, fell into a heavy silence as the words were read. Eichmann, who had spent the trial portraying himself as a mere cog in a larger machine, now faced the full moral weight of his actions. His expression remained stiff, almost bureaucratic, as though he still believed procedure could shield him from the enormity of his guilt. Israel's leadership understood that the world was watching. Every step, from the announcement of the verdict to the handling of his appeals, was carried out with meticulous attention to legal integrity. Eichmann's final petition for clemency reached the desk of President Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, who rejected it without hesitation. The enormity of the crimes required a clear and uncompromising response. In the early hours of June 1, 1962, Adolf Eichmann was executed by hanging, the only civil execution ever carried out by the State of Israel. There was no ceremony, no spectacle, only the quiet closure of an operation that had begun years earlier with a whisper in Buenos Aires. His body was cremated, and his ashes scattered at sea beyond Israel's territorial waters, ensuring that no grave could ever serve as a shrine. With that final act, Israel sealed the story of justice pursued across continents. The legacy of Operation Finale reached far beyond the capture of a single man, reshaping the mission, identity, and moral compass of Mossad for generations to come. In the years following Eichmann's execution, intelligence agencies around the world studied the operation with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Mossad had proven that a small, young nation, still fighting for its own survival, could conduct one of the most daring covert missions in modern history. But more important than the tactical brilliance was the ethical message woven through every stage of the operation, that justice for unimaginable crimes could be pursued without descending into vengeance or lawlessness. For Israel, the mission became a cornerstone of national identity. It demonstrated to survivors and their descendants that their pain had not been forgotten, that the horrors of the Holocaust would not be allowed to fade into diplomatic convenience or historical abstraction. Schools taught the operation as a turning point, a moment when a nation scarred by genocide stood tall and demanded accountability on behalf of millions who could no longer speak. Within Mossad, the operation set a new standard for discipline, coordination, and moral clarity. It established a blueprint for future missions targeting war criminals, terrorists, and threats hiding behind borders or false identities. The agency learned that intelligence work was not only about gathering secrets, it was about preserving memory, defending human dignity, and standing against impunity wherever it tried to take root. And so, long after the trial ended and Eichmann's ashes vanished into the sea, the mission's impact endured, carried forward by a world that had been forced to remember.